When my Uncle Silas passed away, the whole family was buzzing with talk about who would inherit his fortune. He wasn't just wealthy. He was the kind of man who owned multiple estates, drove cars most people only ever saw in magazines, and was rumored to have investments tucked away all over the country. Everyone assumed his death would mean life-changing money for the rest of us. Cousins walked into the lawyer's office practically drooling, ready to claim their share of his $35 million estate. I didn't walk in with that same expectation. Hello, friends. Before we dive into today's story, please help me grow this channel by subscribing, sharing this video with others, and don't forget to hit that like button. Now, let's get started with our story. My mother, Mara, raised me to believe that dignity mattered more than money, and I never had much anyway. I worked hard at the lumber mill, barely getting by, and helped her with bills ever since my father died. I wasn't dreaming about fancy cars or vacation homes, but I still believed that somewhere in his heart, Uncle Silas might have left me something meaningful, some sign that I wasn't invisible to him. The lawyer began reading the will, and just like that, the cousins got exactly what they wanted. Roland, the oldest, inherited one of Silas's lakefront mansions and a collection of antique cars. Cynthia, his sister, received a trust fund that would keep her set for life. Their smug smiles filled the room. When the lawyer finally got to my name, I straightened my back, hopeful for at least a small piece of security for me and my mother. Instead, I heard the words to my nephew, Eldon. I leave one old metal toolbox. Contents unknown. The laughter from my cousins hit like a slap in the face. Roland leaned over with a sneer and said, "Perfect." "The loser gets the junk," Cynthia added. "I guess Silas thought you'd be more comfortable with trash than treasure." Everyone else in the room chuckled or shook their heads as if it were a joke. My face burned, but I kept quiet. I accepted the toolbox like it was nothing, though my heart sank. Carrying that dented, rusted box out of the lawyer's office was one of the most humiliating moments of my life. Everyone else was holding paperwork for properties and bank accounts. I was holding a piece of junk. I could hear the whispers behind me as I walked out, and every step reminded me how small they thought I was. What none of them knew, and what I didn't realize myself yet, was that the real story wasn't about what they got or what I didn't. It was about what was hidden inside that box. And when I discovered it, my life changed in a way none of us could have imagined. After I left the lawyer's office with that rusty old toolbox in my hands, I couldn't shake the feeling of being the butt of a cruel joke. My cousins strutted to their cars with folders full of deeds and bank statements, while I clutched a dented box that looked like it belonged in a junkyard. Their laughter still rang in my ears, louder than the traffic on the street outside. I wanted to believe there was more to it, that maybe Uncle Silas had a reason, but standing there in the parking lot, I felt the sting of humiliation more than anything else. My mother, Mara, was waiting for me at home. She had stayed behind during the will reading because her health kept her from walking long distances, and I didn't want to put her through the spectacle of watching her relatives mock her son. When I walked through the door, she looked up from her rocking chair, her frail hands folded in her lap, and gave me that smile she always reserved for moments when life seemed unbearably heavy. "What did your uncle leave you, Eldon?" she asked gently. I set the toolbox on the kitchen table with a dull thud. "This. Just this." She studied it quietly, her eyes lingering not on the rust and dents, but on the weight I carried in my shoulders. "Do not be ashamed," she said. "Sometimes the smallest gifts carry the greatest meaning." I wanted to believe her, but my pride was bruised. All my life I had worked hard, taken care of her after Dad passed away, and never asked for more than a fair chance. I had hoped my uncle might recognize that in some way. Instead, I had been made to look like a fool in front of family who already thought I was nothing. To understand the bitterness I felt that day, you have to know who my Uncle Silas really was. To most people in our town, he was larger than life. He made his fortune in shipping and real estate, buying up land that no one else wanted and turning it into empires. He was the man who always pulled up in a new car, who wore suits that seemed to cost more than my yearly wages. At family gatherings, he never bragged, but his presence made everyone aware of their own shortcomings. I had admired him when I was younger. I remember being 10 years old and watching him stride across the lawn at a family reunion, handing out gifts to the cousins. Roland got a leather baseball glove. Cynthia got a shiny new bicycle with ribbons on the handlebars. I waited patiently, hoping for something small, even a toy car. When Silas finally turned to me, he patted me on the shoulder and said, "One day, Eldon, you'll understand that not all treasures shine." Then he walked away without leaving me anything. At the time, I thought he had forgotten me. As I grew older, I wondered if maybe he saw something in me that was different, something that couldn't be rewarded with material things. Still, when I sat at that will reading and heard the words "rusty toolbox," I felt like that little boy again, overlooked and forgotten. Roland and Cynthia had always carried themselves like royalty in the family. Roland was the kind of cousin who bragged at every holiday dinner about his new business ventures. Though most of them failed, he wore arrogance like armor, and when he laughed at me, it was always the kind of laugh that cut straight through the skin. Cynthia was no better, sharp-tongued and endlessly critical. She looked at me as if my hard work at the mill was proof that I lacked ambition, not evidence of my loyalty and endurance. To them, my life was a series of failures, and the toolbox seemed to confirm their opinion. I carried that weight back into my small home, where every wall told the story of struggle. The linoleum floor was peeling. The wallpaper in the hallway had started to curl at the edges. My mother's medication sat in neat rows on the counter, reminders of the bills that seemed to multiply each month. I had no mansion, no expensive car, not even a steady savings account. I had only my pride, my labor, and my promise to care for my mother, no matter how hard it became. The toolbox sat on the kitchen table for hours as I tried to ignore it. I made dinner for my mother, the same beans and cornbread we ate most nights, and listened to her hum softly as she sewed a loose button back onto my work shirt. She never complained about our life. She had known both hardship and comfort, and she always told me that a man was measured not by what he had, but by how he carried himself when he had nothing. That night, as I sat across from her, I realized why the sting of humiliation hurt so deeply. It wasn't just the laughter of my cousins, or the disappointment of walking away with so little. It was the fear that maybe Uncle Silas had never truly seen me at all. Maybe he had looked at me the same way they did, as a man destined for scraps, unworthy of trust or responsibility. But Mara's words stayed with me. She had said, "The smallest gifts sometimes carry the greatest meaning." I didn't know what she meant, but I knew she believed it. That faith alone was enough to keep me from tossing the box into the shed and forgetting about it. I kept staring at it, running my fingers over the rough surface, wondering why it felt heavier than it should have. I didn't yet realize that weight was more than physical. It was the weight of a secret waiting to be uncovered, the kind of secret that could rewrite my entire life. The toolbox became a shadow in my home. It sat on the kitchen table for days. Its presence gnawed at me in ways I couldn't explain. Every time I walked past it, I felt both anger and curiosity. I tried convincing myself that it was nothing more than a cruel joke, a final insult to remind me of my place in the family. Yet something about the weight of it lingered in my mind. On the third evening after the will reading, Roland showed up at my door. He leaned casually against the frame as if he owned the place, his silk shirt crisp and his cologne filling the air before he even spoke. "So, cousin," he said with a grin, "how's that treasure of yours treating you? Found any golden nails in that box yet?" I clenched my jaw, forcing politeness. "It's just a toolbox, Roland," he smirked, stepping closer, his voice dropping into a sneer. "That's all you'll ever get, Eldon. Junk for a junk man. You should have seen Cynthia at dinner last night." She nearly fell out of her chair, laughing, imagining you polishing that rusty thing like it was worth a dime. My mother, who was sitting in the living room, called out sharply, "Roland, that's enough." Her voice still carried authority even in her fragile state. But Roland only shrugged, tossed me a mocking wave, and sauntered back to his car. His laughter echoed down the street as he drove away. I sat down hard in the chair by the table, staring at the toolbox. Roland's words stung, not because I believed them, but because I had no proof he was wrong. I opened the lid again, half hoping something miraculous would appear. All I saw were ordinary tools, a hammer with a splintered handle, a few wrenches, and a cracked tape measure, tools that looked like they hadn't been used in years. Nothing about them spoke of meaning or hidden value. But when I lifted the box, I felt that strange heaviness again, like something was pressing down from the bottom. I ran my hand along the underside and heard a faint rattle. My heart quickened, though I told myself I was being foolish still. I carried it into the bedroom and set it on the floor. I tapped the bottom panel with my knuckles. The sound wasn't hollow, it was dense, as if a second layer lay beneath the surface. I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer and worked it into the edge. The metal resisted at first, but with enough pressure the panel began to lift. Sweat ran down my temples as I pried it open, my breath shallow, every muscle tense with anticipation. Finally, the panel gave way, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside was not money or gold, but an old flip phone, dusty and scratched. Its antenna bent slightly. For a moment, I stared at it in confusion. Why would my uncle hide a phone inside a false bottom of a toolbox? I pressed the power button, expecting nothing. To my shock, the screen lit up with a faint glow. Before I could think, the phone rang. The sharp sound pierced the silence of the room, and my heart nearly stopped. I fumbled with the buttons, staring at the small display where the word incoming flashed. I glanced at my mother, who had come to the doorway with wide eyes. "Answer it," she whispered. My hands trembled as I pressed the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. "Eldon," a deep voice said, steady and deliberate. "If you're hearing this, it means Silas trusted you. The real inheritance begins now." I froze. My throat tightened and my voice cracked when I finally managed to respond. "Who is this?" "You'll know soon enough," the voice replied. "Follow the instructions and everything will be revealed. Do not share this with anyone else. The others wouldn't understand. This is between you and the man who knew your worth." The call ended abruptly. I pulled the phone away and stared at it, my pulse hammering in my ears. My mother stepped into the room, her hand resting on my shoulder. "Eldon, what did they say?" I swallowed hard. "They said the real inheritance begins now." Her eyes softened, filled with something between fear and pride. "Your uncle was a complicated man, but he never did anything without purpose. If he chose you, then there's a reason." I sat there on the edge of the bed, the phone still warm in my hand, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The humiliation from Roland and Cynthia felt distant now, replaced by a growing fire inside me. For the first time since that will reading, I felt a spark of possibility. This phone, this hidden message meant I wasn't forgotten. Silas had left me more than scraps. He had left me a secret and perhaps a responsibility. But with that spark came fear. I knew my cousins would never stop mocking me if they discovered what I held. Worse, if this so-called real inheritance was valuable, they might try to take it by force. Roland's greed knew no limits, and Cynthia's cruelty had no brakes. Whatever I was stepping into, I would have to tread carefully. That night, I barely slept. The phone lay on the nightstand beside me, silent and mysterious. I kept replaying the words in my mind. The real inheritance begins now. I wondered if I was stepping into a gift or a trap. Either way, I understood one thing clearly. My life was no longer ordinary. That toolbox had carried not just the weight of metal, but the weight of a secret that would change everything. The phone sat on my nightstand like a living thing, its silence heavier than the sound of its ring had been. I woke up every few hours, half expecting it to buzz again, half hoping it would stay quiet. When morning came, my mother found me at the kitchen table with dark circles under my eyes and the toolbox pushed aside. She poured me coffee, her thin hands steady despite her age. "You have to decide. Eldon," she said softly. "You can ignore it and keep living as you always have, or you can follow where it leads. But if Silas went to the trouble of hiding that phone, then this is no joke." Her words settled into me like stone. I knew she was right. The humiliation from Roland's visit still burned in my chest. But now I had something he didn't. I had been chosen, though I didn't yet understand why. That evening, the phone rang again. I nearly dropped it as I fumbled to answer. The same deep voice spoke. "Calm and measured. Eldon, listen carefully. There's a storage facility on the edge of town. Unit 17. The code to unlock it is the date of your father's birthday. Go tonight. Do not tell anyone where you're going. The call ended before I could ask questions. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. Whoever this was, they knew things only family would know. My father's birthday wasn't something you could find written in a public record. I told my mother what the voice had said. She nodded slowly, her expression grave. Your uncle trusted you. He never wasted trust. If you go carefully. Take the truck and don't let your cousin see you. The thought of Roland or Cynthia catching wind of this chilled me. If they suspected there was more to my inheritance than a rusty toolbox, they would hound me until they had it for themselves. I decided to move quickly. By 9 that night, I was behind the wheel of my old pickup, the toolbox locked in the back, the phone in my pocket. The roads were quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound sharper. My headlights cut through the dark as I drove past empty fields and shuttered shops. My hands gripped the wheel tighter with every how. When I pulled up to the storage facility, the gate stood tall and forbidding. The phone buzzed in my pocket just as I killed the engine. The voice returned, steady and unhurried. The gate code is the year you graduated high school. Use it, then go straight to Unit 17. I punched in the numbers, my heart hammering, and the gate creaked open. I eased the truck inside, the gravel crunching under the tires sounding louder than it should have. The rows of storage units stretched in both directions, metal doors glinting under the dim overhead lights. I parked in front of number 17 and stepped out. The keypad on the door blinked red. I entered my father's birthday, each digit trembling under my fingertips. When the final number clicked into place, the light turned green and the lock released with a heavy clank. I pulled the door upward, and the echo of it rolling back seemed to shake the whole row. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and oil. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary unit. Shelves, a tarp covering something large, stacks of boxes. But I could feel the weight of intention in every detail. The phone buzzed again in my pocket. I answered quickly. The voice said, "You're in the right place. Look beneath the tarp, then read the letter on the desk." I stepped inside, my boots crunching against the concrete floor. The tarp covered something heavy. With a deep breath, I pulled it away and revealed 3 metal crates stacked together. My chest tightened when I saw the stenciled letters on their sides. Property of S. Halloway. My uncle's name. Beside the crates sat a desk, old but solid. On top of it was a single envelope with my name written in bold strokes, Eldon. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a letter written in my uncle's steady handwriting. Eldon, if you're reading this, then you've already proven yourself. I left the estates and money to your cousins because that's what they wanted. It will ruin them. And I no longer care. You, however, I trust with what truly matters. These crates contain part of my legacy, not just wealth, but records, maps, and evidence of investments that only you can manage. I chose you because you work with your hands. You live with humility. And you understand loyalty. Do not waste this. This is your inheritance. Protect it. I had to sit down. The words swam before my eyes. My uncle hadn't abandoned me, not mocked me. He had chosen me above the rest. The humiliation I felt days before began to crumble, replaced by something heavier but stronger, responsibility. I looked at the crates again, their steel sides gleaming under the light. I imagined the cousins celebrating their estates and cars, unaware that the real fortune, the one worth more than money, was sitting in a dusty storage unit with my name attached to it. For the first time in years, I felt the spark of something I thought I'd lost long ago, pride. I picked up the phone once more. I read the letter. I said into the receiver. The voice replied, "Then you understand. This is only the beginning." The line went dead. I stood there in the quiet unit, my uncle's words echoing in my mind, and I knew I'd crossed a line I could never return from. My life had changed. What came next would demand everything from me. I stood in that storage unit with my uncle's letter in my hands and the crates glinting. In the dull light, my legs felt heavy, my chest tight, as though the air itself carried the weight of the moment. For years, I'd been made to believe I was the forgotten nephew, the one destined to live in the shadows of my cousin's arrogance. Yet here I was, staring at proof that my uncle had seen something in me. No one else did. I placed the letter carefully back on the desk and turned to the crates. They were locked with heavy padlocks, each one stamped with the same initials. I tried lifting the first crate, but it barely budged. Whatever was inside carried a serious weight. I grabbed the crowbar leaning against the wall and wedged it under the lock until the metal snapped. When I lifted the lid, I froze. Inside, stacked neatly in rows, were gold bars, dozens of them shining even under the dim overhead bulb. I'd only ever seen gold in pictures, but the sheer glow of it was unmistakable. My knees nearly buckled. The second crate held bundles of cash wrapped tight, the edges crisp even with age. The third was different. Inside were leather-bound journals, maps rolled up with twine, and a set of old keys. I pulled one journal out and flipped through it. Each page contained my uncle's handwriting, careful and deliberate, documenting accounts, investments, and notes about properties scattered across different states. It wasn't just wealth. It was a roadmap to something larger, something my cousins would never dream existed. The phone buzzed again. I answered quickly, my voice shaking. I opened them. The gold, the cash, the journals. "What is all this?" The voice on the other end was calm, almost proud. "It's your uncle's true fortune. Not the flashy estates and cars he gave away, but the foundation of his empire. He trusted you to carry it forward. He believed you had the heart to protect it, not squander it." I swallowed hard, staring at the journals in my hands. "Why me?" He barely spoke to me. "Because he watched you," the voice said firmly. "He knew you cared for your mother when no one else would. He knew you worked with your hands, earned your life with sweat instead of greed. He knew you wouldn't betray him. You were his choice, Eldon, not Roland, not Cynthia." Tears stung my eyes as I looked down at the gold, the cash, the journals, all waiting for me. The mocking laughter of my cousins replayed in my head. But now it no longer pierced me. They thought they'd won, but they'd been left with toys. I was standing inside the true inheritance. Suddenly, headlights swept across the rows of storage units, breaking me out of my daze. My stomach dropped. I ducked behind the crates, my pulse pounding. Through the slats of the door, I saw Roland's car roll slowly into the facility. The sleek black hood glinted under the overhead lights. My heart raced as I watched him climb out. His phone pressed to his ear, his eyes scanning the row. "Yeah," he said loudly, his voice carrying in the quiet night. "The loser's truck is here. He's hiding something." I clenched my fists. He must have followed me. My secret was seconds away from discovery. I reached for the phone in my pocket, whispering into it. "Roland's here. What do I do?" The voice replied without hesitation. "Lock the unit and leave now. Protect what's inside. Don't let him see it." I closed the crate lids, yanked the tarp back over them, and slammed the door shut. My fingers shook as I locked it again, punching the numbers into the keypad with desperate speed. Roland's footsteps echoed closer, his tone sharp with impatience. "Eldon," he barked, "I know you're in there. Open up, let me see what you've got." I forced myself to walk calmly toward my truck, though every muscle in me screamed to run. "It's just an old box, Roland," I said, my voice steady, even as my insides burned. "You came all the way out here for nothing." He glared at me, suspicion written across his face. "You're lying." I met his eyes, something inside me shifting. For the first time, I didn't feel smaller than him. I felt stronger. I climbed into my truck, started the engine, and looked at him one last time. "Uncle Silas left me what I needed. That's all you need to know." I pulled out of the facility, leaving Roland standing there under the harsh lights, his fists clenched, his pride wounded. My hands gripped the wheel tightly as I drove away, my breath ragged, but a sense of certainty surged through me. I had protected the secret, at least for now. When I reached home, my mother was waiting at the window. She saw the look on my face as I stepped inside and asked no questions. She simply said, "You found it, haven't you?" I nodded, the weight of everything crashing down on me more than I ever imagined. She placed her hand on mine. "Then you must carry it wisely. That's what your uncle wanted." In that moment, I realized the true climax of my story wasn't the discovery of gold or journals or hidden fortunes. It was the realization that my uncle had believed in me when no one else did. The toolbox had been a doorway, The false bottom a key, and the phone a voice guiding me toward the truth. My inheritance wasn't just wealth, it was responsibility, trust, and the chance to prove that the man everyone underestimated was the one who mattered most. The night I returned home from the storage unit, I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table, with the letter from my uncle laid out in front of she, and the words blurred as I read them again and again. My uncle hadn't mocked me. He hadn't abandoned me. He had trusted me with something far greater than money. For the first time in my life, I felt the quiet strength of being chosen. The next morning, my mother noticed the difference in me. She studied me over her cup of tea and said, "Your father always believed you were made for more than this small life." I think Silas believed the same. I nodded slowly. He left me something real, Ma, not what Roland and Cynthia think they wanted. Something more, something I have to protect. She reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. Then protect it and use it to do good. That's the only way wealth has meaning. Her words guided me in the days that followed. I returned to the storage unit, unlocking the crates one by one, cataloging everything inside. The gold was overwhelming. The cash could have wiped out every debt I'd ever known and still left me a fortune. But the journals were what captured me most. My uncle had written down his thoughts, his strategies, his mistakes, and his hopes. It felt as though he was speaking to me across time, teaching me to see the world through his eyes. I began reading them late into the nights. He described how he built his fortune, not through shortcuts but through persistence, patience, and calculated risks. He wrote about people he had trusted and people who had betrayed him. He admitted his regrets, especially about how he'd distanced himself from family because greed had poisoned too many hearts. The more I read, the more I understood why he had left me this secret inheritance. He wanted someone who wouldn't be corrupted by it. Meanwhile, Roland and Cynthia grew restless. Word traveled fast in our family, and they began to notice that I didn't seem crushed by my so-called worthless gift. Roland stopped by unannounced again, his voice dripping with suspicion. "You've been quiet, cousin. Too quiet. What are you hiding?" I met his gaze with a calm I'd never known before. "I'm not hiding anything, Roland. I'm just living my life," he sneered. But there was uncertainty in his eyes. He had always fed off my weakness, and now that it was gone, he didn't know how to treat me. Cynthia called me a week later, her tone sharp and mocking. "Don't tell me you actually believe Silas loved you enough to leave anything of value. He thought you were pathetic." I let her words slide off me like rain on stone. "Believe what you want, Cynthia. I know the truth. That truth gave me peace. I no longer felt the need to prove myself to them. I no longer burned with the anger of their laughter. My uncle had seen my worth. My mother had always believed in me. That was enough. Over time, I began to use the inheritance in ways no one expected. I paid off my mother's medical bills and made sure she had the comfort she deserved. I donated anonymously to the local church that had kept its doors open for struggling families. I funded repairs for the community center where kids went after school, a place that had once kept me out of trouble when I was young. Each act reminded me that wealth meant nothing unless it was put to work for good. The gold and cash were tools, but the real treasure was the chance to live with purpose. My cousins, for all their luxury, remained trapped in the endless hunger for more. They flaunted their mansions and their cars, yet their eyes stayed fixed on me, suspicious and jealous. I pitied them because they would never understand what I'd gained. One evening, Roland confronted me again. His face was red with anger as he demanded, "Tell me the truth. What did Silas really leave you?" I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady and calm. "He left me something you'll never understand. Trust." For the first time, Roland had no response. He turned away, muttering under his breath. But I knew my words had struck him. As months passed, I found myself transformed. I was no longer the man mocked as a failure. I was no longer the nephew clutching a rusty box. I was a man carrying the weight of a legacy, not defined by greed, but by purpose. The toolbox still sits in my home. I keep it as a reminder not of humiliation, but of the moment when everything changed. It reminds me that sometimes the world disguises its greatest gifts in the plainest packages. That lesson is worth more than gold. So when I tell this story, I don't tell it to boast about wealth or fortune. I tell it because of what it taught me. Never let the laughter of others convince you that you're worthless. Never assume that the smallest gift carries no value, and never forget that real inheritance is not measured in estates or cars or bank accounts. It is measured in trust, responsibility, and what you choose to do when the chance finally comes your way. Uncle Silas gave me more than money. He gave me the opportunity to prove myself, and that has changed everything. If this story touched you, if it made you think about what real value in life means, do me a favor, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world.